question, yes, I have woke up and said Auburn's going to the Final Four, and just shaking my head and said I can't even believe how that sounds or how that feels. But we've been in this sort of March grind since March 1st, when we went on the road and had to beat Georgia to put ourselves in position to get a decent seed in the SEC tournament and be able to advance and win the championship. And it's just been quite a run. So we're plugging into going to Nashville, going to Salt Lake City, going to Kansas City, now going to Minneapolis, and sort of trying to keep our guys on a very rhythmic, same schedule. And the road doesn't get any easier. I thought that the New Mexico State 5-12 matchup was as tough as there was. Maybe Oregon as a 12 might have been maybe a little tougher, but New Mexico State, I knew how good they were. Promised the team the hardest one to win was going to be the first one, and that for a while we weren't going to see a team better than New Mexico State. And in saying that, Kansas is our next opponent. Bill Self played New Mexico State earlier in the year, and for me to be able to tell my team, look, whether it's Northeastern or Kansas, they're not going to be better than New Mexico State. That's not a knock on Northeastern or Kansas, and it was accurate. And so to then have to face, after Kansas, the number 1 seed in the tournament, North Carolina, and then have to face the number 2 seed, Kentucky, who I had said from the beginning of the tournament, if they were at full strength, they might have been the best team in the tournament. And so, obviously, and now we get the only 1 seed left in the tournament, and that's Virginia out of the ACC, a team that's only lost to Duke twice and Florida State. So the task is obviously daunting, and certainly going to Minneapolis without our most valuable player, Chumo Kiki, makes it even more challenging. And but we're going to represent the Midwest region, and we're going to represent the SEC, and go see if we can't win 2 games.
You talked about the relationship with Marquise and D'Angelo from this year, and just kind of what that meant for the way he's played. Can you take us through a little bit more, just kind of what you've seen from that?
Yeah, I think, again, we talked about the fact that you guys follow D'Angelo on social media, and it's easy to sort of see him, kind of depending on which way the wind was blowing. D'Angelo could have quit, and he could have just given up, and he could have said, I'm just going to wait till next year. I'm behind Chuma. There's, you got Anthony and Horace and Austin. There's just too many guys on the front line, and I'm not in shape to move to the 3. But he didn't, and I give my coaching staff a lot of credit for that. I give Marquise I did give D'Angelo a lot of credit for that, but specifically Marquise. I asked Marquise because he played the same position as D'Angelo to try to walk through this with him if you can. You can empathize with him as a former player. And the key, and my wife Brandy, in fact, she doesn't get involved too terribly much, but she's heard me say some things over and over again, I'm sure as you guys have. And I always talk about being right and being ready. And I encouraged D'Angelo to be right and be ready. I promised him that his opportunity would present itself at some point during the season, because it always does. And what happens is, a lot of times, guys aren't right and ready. They're angry, they're discouraged, they're disappointed, they want to blame a lot of other people. D'Angelo hung in there and put himself in position for God to bless him by just doing the right things as best he could, given how trying. I think the other thing that's really extremely positive from D'Angelo, he's been really loyal to Auburn. He's been really loyal to Auburn. He's been through a lot. And yet, I don't think he ever wavered on being appreciative of the opportunity Auburn gave him, the patience that Auburn showed him when he went through his challenges with his eligibility, and yet not even being able to be out there. And then you watch Chuma Okeke during the course of our season talk about when we go to the bench, we don't drop off. How many times did you hear, Chuma doesn't say much, right? And if you were to go back and get a soundbite or two of his, I think half the time he's talking about when we go to the bench, we don't drop off. He's talking about D'Angelo. He's talking about Horace. He's talking about Austin. He's talking about the very guys that we're calling upon now to be able to allow us to continue to be successful.
And just one other, Jared comes in, I think he's 5'9", 5'10", and then Virginia has a 5'9" guard that they start. Just
Hey, does anybody want to take this call from Kelsey Jacobs?
Go for it, Coach.
You can answer if you want, Coach. That's my bad.
It probably won't let me.
You swipe up on it. That's fine. I'll see myself.
So that wasn't a.
Yeah.
My wife doesn't know about that.
Right, yeah.
I was just asking about Kie Clark and obviously Jared Harper. You got two 5'9" guards kind of in the same Final Four. Just is that kind of cool to see, honestly?
Well, Jared's not 5'9".
Or sorry, he's yeah.
No, he wouldn't even be. He's nowhere near. He don't want to participate in that. He may be an undersized 5'11", but he's not 5'9". I can't speak for anybody else. I can only speak for Jared, and just tell you that size does matter, but it's never been a factor for him. He used his speed and quickness to be able to define his game. I've seen him in many major moments, and the moments haven't been too big for him. Let's face it, our defense in the second half and Jared and Bryce's offensive abilities in the second half got us past a great Kentucky team. There have been games along the way, I think, where the coaching and things that we did were helpful. I think in the Kentucky game, that was about players making plays, period. We did change up some of our ball screen offense to try and hold on to some screens longer to get Jared free of Ashton Hagans because he's such a great ball screen defender. But then Jared went and did the rest. Once Kentucky started to switch and not let us get our open threes off, which was a big part of their game plan, we just let Bryce Brown try to attack the matchup, and Bryce made plays. And that's just all there is to it. It's not rocket science. It's not X's and O's. It's kids making plays.
I've heard your players talk about in previous neutral site settings and everything about trying to get used to the gym, the depth perception with seats. When you play like in a hockey arena in the SEC tournament, you're going to be playing in a football stadium. How do you prepare for that as far as getting your shooters accustomed to the seats being so far back in effective depth?
We'll just go there. We will be there Thursday, Friday, and Saturday, and those few days. Our guys have shot in lots of different gyms over the course of their careers, and they probably never shot with that kind of a depth perception before. But I do think it won't be like we're walking into something that we've never seen before, because they will have seen it a little bit before. We're also going to go over to the University of Minnesota and get some shots too, because they've got quite a cavernous building, not as big as the one we'll be playing in, but lots of room behind the baskets and an elevated floor.
Have you gotten any update on Chuma's surgery today?
I have not got an update. I was with him at the hotel this morning before he left town, and he seemed more concerned about the flight of a small plane than anything that was going to take place down in Pensacola.
What does it say about Jared that the way he played when y'all had to have it down the stretch?
Well, I think a combination of preparing for the moment. I just I'm glad that he was out there shooting a free throw, not me, you know, and he just lined it up and obviously converted or made the plays he had to make. I think he's just felt prepared. I think the only other thing about our run is, you know, last year when you go to the NCAA tournament for the first time in a long time, when you win a regular season championship, one of only 3 that Auburn's ever won, it was shocking and pleasing to me that at the end of the year, all those guys talked about was unfinished business, and to be able to state it over and over again. We marketed it unfinished business. This is a championship club that made history, and our marketing was unfinished business, which means, because it came from the players. I don't want to be, I'm not the spin doctor. I want to follow what their lead was, and their lead was, felt like they left something on the table, whether it be the SEC tournament or the NCAA tournament. And so they surely have gone about their business. So that comes from within. That comes from Jared. That comes from Bryce, Horace. That comes from the leadership on this team.
Bruce, you talk about free throws. It seems like in this tournament, missed free throws have played a huge role in a lot of really close games.
Yeah. Well,
How hard is it in that setting to go out there?
Well, first of all, you're going to be a good free throw shooting team if you get your best free throw shooters to the line. If you get a bad free throw shooter to the line, he's going to consistently struggle, and probably even more so in pressure moments. But if you get a good free throw shooter to the line, then you give yourself a better chance. There are going to be fewer free throws in the tournament because I think the officials are very conscious of we're going to let these guys play, and we're going to let the players decide the game. I'd like for them to call it the way they always do, but I think they do tend to let it go a little bit. Therefore, there are fewer free throws. Therefore, you better make the ones you get, and that's why I think the free throw shooting gets more attention.
We heard a lot after the game. A lot of the guys in the locker room saying that Jared and Bryce are the best backcourt in the country. When you recruited them, you know, Bryce a 3-star, Jared a 4-star. Did you ever envision them being as good as they've turned out to be?
Well, I am on a soapbox a lot for, like, Jared Harper not being on the Bob Cousy watch list. You've heard me say that many times. Or that Bryce Brown maybe not on the Jerry West, you know, list of 2 guards or whatever. But you've never heard me say they are the best backcourt in the country, and I don't say that because I'd like them to be considered. I'd like them to be on the list. I believe they are worthy of that. When the season's over, we'll determine whether or not they were the best backcourt in the country. It's not. I think it's really good to get them on the list, and if they're not on the list, then you have to ask why. But right now, Virginia's got a pretty good backcourt. Michigan State's got a pretty good backcourt. Texas Tech's got a pretty good backcourt. We'll go see who the best backcourt in the country is.
Bruce, you mentioned making plays down the stretch and kind of staying out of the way, letting those guys. How valuable is that to have those 2 guys that played so much basketball in this time of the year?
Yeah, I mean it's important, and sometimes, you know, the other guys on the team have got to recognize when somebody's got a good matchup. You know, whether it's Samir Dowdy being able to take his man downhill, whether it's Austin Wiley being able to score inside with his back to the basket, whether it's, you know, to get the ball to Jared in late game situations or get Bryce Brown a look. I mean, those things are all things you got to do. Now, when you play against a team like Virginia, whose efficiency numbers are off the charts both offensively and defensively, and who play at one of the slowest paces in college basketball, freedoms that I give my players are going to be challenged because we better take advantage of possessions because they are every single time, and there will be fewer of them. So we can have, you know, fewer empty possessions than we would typically have, otherwise we're going to get beat.
This is probably not the setting to ask this, but I don't know if we're ever going to be able to get one-on-one with you because you got so much stuff going on, but and it's a weird personal question, but it has nothing to do with basketball. Why do you sweat so much? And what do you do to take care of your voice after games? Because it sounds like your voice is gone, and then by the next game you've got it back.
Yeah.
Do you do anything?
I did get a throat kit from a professor here at the university, and I'm going to try it on tonight a little bit. I some Cepacol, we do some lozenges. I was in the high school musical back in the day, and nobody's going to ask me to sing anymore because I can't. It's an occupational hazard. The sweating, I think, just comes from, I think it comes from being buttoned up. I think if I didn't wear a tie and it went open collar, I wouldn't sweat as much. But when you are working as hard as we work and you button it up and you put a tie on, I mean, where does all that heat go? Get kind of trapped in there. So I think that's the reason why I sweat a lot. And I don't have a very big give a hoot factor. I just don't give a hoot. I'm working, you know, and like if other coaches don't sweat, they don't sweat. If they don't yell, they don't yell. They don't have facial expressions. That's them. I do, and
Have you ever?
You
I don't give a hoot.
ever
Have
thought
you
about
ruined
being
a
like
suit?
Mark Few and not wearing a tie?
I went through some times where I actually went through a period here where we didn't wear a tie, but we didn't win enough. So I had to go back to, I went back to wearing a tie. When I was at Wisconsin, Milwaukee, I was wearing a mock on the road, just like a t-shirt. Man, that was a great look. My chest was a little bigger, I was in a little better shape, and I wore just a t-shirt under a sport jacket. Oh, I loved that. I could coach in that all day long. But we're supposed to be a little more professional. I don't know why coaches have to get dressed up and wear suits and
I've always
ties
wondered
to
that.
coach basketball. I wish we could coach like we coach in Maui or in a tournament where it's you just in a slacks and a polo, and that's how we would coach.
Have you ever completely ruined a suit from sweating? That you just said, I can't wear this again, the dry cleaner can't take care of it?
No, in fact, the suit that I wore at Tennessee, at Florida when I was at Tennessee, the story behind that is I had a fever. That I was
Really?
sick, and so I was already lit up and coached it and hydrated as much as I possibly could, but it was a light green suit. I don't know why I had a light green suit, but I did. And by the time the end of the game was, it was a dark green suit. And it wasn't just a jacket. I mean, it was the pants. And it wasn't just like certain part of the pants, it was like the entire thing. And so I actually was able to get that thing dry cleaned and wore it for a few more years.
I guess now's the right time to follow up on that. I mean, I know you love film work. Do you ever go back and watch the film of yourself on the sideline?
No, because I can't learn anything from it. I love to watch film, but I can't really learn from it. And Steven always says, listen, try to not pay attention to how he's saying it, but listen to what he's saying. And I think the only thing that I can tell you is if you come watch me in practice or you come watch me in an exhibition game, watch us play at home or on the road, I'm the same. For better or worse, or for worse, I'm the same. Because I don't want my players to see any different. Gee, coach looks a little uptight about this one. I'm uptight about every one of them. We get off the practice floor, we get off the game floor, and then I'm different.
On a different film note, a lot of people were saying that scene in Kansas City with Chuma being wheeled in and this team going to the first Final Four ever was like a movie scene. If a movie ever did get made about this team, who would you cast to play yourself?
Thanks.
Maybe Adam Sandler. Just keep it light.
Coach, the AP All-American team was just handed down. No Auburn player even got an honorable mention. Does that put a chip on your guys' shoulder?
Yeah, it does. Now there are, and I'd be curious. I asked Cody this question during the course of the tournament. I don't want to put him on the spot because you guys know I always trash Cody in front of you. If Coach Malzahn asked him a question, he'd have it just like that. But there was a point during the Sweet 16 where I asked Cody how many teams left didn't have a guy on the first team all-conference, and there were several. At that point there were 5 teams. How many teams now in the Final Four didn't have, and who's that? So I guess Auburn right now is the only team in the Final Four that didn't have a player on first team all-conference. Virginia did, Michigan State did, Texas Tech did, and so yeah, that should be a motivating factor for our guys. And again, I say that with all due respect to the guys that were first team all-conference in our league. I don't know that I would have changed a single one of them. because they were all deserving. And when the all defensive team came out and there were 5 guys on it, my only question was, look, there are 8 guys on the first team, 8 guys on the second team, they honor 16 guys. Why would you honor 5 defensive players, why not 8? And then I don't even know if Chuma Kiki would have been on that list. But, yeah, it is a motivating factor.
After watching, I'm sure you've been able to watch them since yesterday's teleconference, but with Virginia, have you seen anybody like them this year? And obviously we know they love to play defense and slow it down, value possessions. What do you got to do to beat them?
Well, it's going to be, first of all, I mean, like anything, we got to handle the moment. You know, we can't change who we are, and that's all of us. It's going to be a big stage and an elevated floor. And are we going to play between the lines like we've been playing? Easier said than done. The second thing would be just simply, again, the efficiencies that Virginia plays with, the physicality they play with. They play defense physically with their hands and their bodies. They screen and use screens as well as anybody. They won't call a moving screen because they move on every one of them. So they can't call them every time. So we just got to figure out a way to navigate our way through probably the best screening team that we've seen. They got great personnel, and they've got a Hall of Fame coaching family. You know, between Dick and Tony and so many other family members, that's a tall task.